I don't know. That actually happened. It happened in Salt Lake City. So when I first started trying to teach some karate out here, and maybe they got a hold of the Ken Alligayer message board too. This is so, people are so cowardly. You know, I just despise cowardice. I despise it in myself and I despise it in others. So this guy comes into our class and kind of asks questions, but he doesn't reveal who he is. But then at some point I'm just like, oh, I know who you are. He was teaching martial arts in the same community center as me, but he wasn't telling me that he was. And he was basically trying to, like, I don't know, he was trying to like get information so that he could, I don't know, bash me or something. And then he goes to the director of the center and basically tries to get me thrown out of the center, you know? And I'm just like, what a coward. Like, you could just come to me and just, you know, have an honest conversation, you know? But anyway, I guess those people are always going to exist. They rarely, at least he confronted me face to face and not on a keyboard, but he could have just been honest about it. He pretended like he was looking for martial arts for himself or his son or something, you know. But
yeah, it's so strange. It's almost bimodal, right? You've got the people who are, so I don't know if insecure is the right word, but like, I think on our end, we're very welcoming to people because we have some confidence in what we do, I think. And then there's the other end where it's like, what we do is the only thing and anything else is wrong. And like, there's not a whole lot of middle ground between those two stances.
You know, and you know, and another thing about helping me with my attitude of being overly critical of other martial arts, and it's not that that we shouldn't look at other people's techniques and think about them in relation to our techniques or, you know, our principles that drive them. But you know, Scott Mullins and Mr. Capella, they love the martial arts. It's rare to hear them. I don't think I've ever heard Scott bash anybody. And even Capella, I haven't really heard him do that. He's really supportive of people in the martial arts. And one of the times that he surprised me was we had our tournament, and one of these guys from, I think he's one of Joe Bragg's black belts originally or something. But he's a tournament guy, and he did the stuff with the kama where they have the like leather straps and they whip it around the hand and whip it around the neck and all this and that. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, Capella's not going to like that. That's nonsense. You can't, you know. Nope. he takes me over to this guy and he says, hey, you should show Jose how to do the thing with the you know, the leather straps and everything. So you should learn this. You know, he tells me, he said, you should learn this from him, you know. And I never, you know, I think we played around at the tournament, but I never, you know, got with him to learn more about it. But it was interesting. It was fascinating, you know. So anyway, they're just pro martial arts, you know. You know, it doesn't have to be, I don't know. It doesn't have to all be like this whole attitude of, well, if I'm fighting on the street, like, what does the street even mean? I don't even know what you're talking about, really. I mean, and if you're thinking, well, in our dojo, we just do street fighting techniques, it's like, no, you really don't, in a sense. In the sense that, first, most people don't ever want to fight. That's why people say, how many street fights have you been in? And I'm like, none. And it was like, well, how can that be? I was like, well, probably a lot of reasons, but because I'm not going to initiate the actual physical confrontation, that's why. And most people will not. Now, every now and then you run into somebody who will, who really will pop off and hit you. But for the most part, they'll just talk and then nothing will happen. But if you do run into that person who will fight you and really fight you, and Joaquin was one of these guys. You know, Joaquin told me a story about biting a guy's cheek. Like, he ended up on top of the guy, just bit his cheek. There are people who are vicious. So yes, we are training for techniques that we can fight with, absolutely. But there's a level of viciousness of some people out there that there is no preparation for. There are people who will grab whatever's laying around and hit you in the head with it. You know, and even though I might want to defend myself, I don't imagine that I would hit somebody in the head with a brick. right? You know, I don't imagine that I would bite somebody. I might even if it was to my survival, I'm not sure if I have certain levels of viciousness in me, you know? So anyway, this whole like, well, on the street, you know, I'm just like, I don't know. Maybe you've been in a lot of street fights. Maybe you need to move to a different neighborhood or change your attitude or.
Right. Maybe you've made poor life decisions that have led you to these street fights.
I just been confronted plenty of times, and sometimes I'm like, oh man, I should really hit that guy, you know, because he deserved it. But then in reality, it's just like, no, I shouldn't have hit him. That was the right thing. And plus, you're just opening up you might be opening up a whole other set of problems you're gonna have to deal with. Because now you have to deal with this guy down the road. You have to look over your shoulder. You might come and damage your car. You know, like even if you win, you probably lose. The police are going to be called. They're going to have a criminal record over getting in a, you know, fist fight with this idiot, or you could get killed, or you could kill somebody, which somebody, you know, at the boxing gym that happened years ago, you know, where he went out, and agreed upon fight, hit the guy fell back on the rocky this parking lot, you know, down by the old Felix's, cracked his head on his rock and died.
Wow.
You know, so I mean, serious business. So I don't know. So yes, defend yourself. Yes, train hard. You know, but you don't have to bash Tai Chi because they're not the most practical self-defense martial art. It has its own benefits, and sure, I'm sure that, you know, there's a self-defense application to it. But you don't have to all turn into, I only do the things that I can, you know, kill somebody with. I mean, unless that's what you want to do. I mean, I do the martial arts for the arts themselves, not just for fighting. You know? So anyway, taking up all your time here with the
not at all.
long-winded.
This is awesome.
Thoughts.
That's kind of why we were inviting you first. We knew we'd get that kind of.
He didn't have to talk much, and you would do all the talking.
But you have plenty of material, then you can cut it up any way you'd like, you know.
I've kind of jumped around other styles over the last few years or whatever. And knowing the way that Goshin Jutsu evolved, like the stories I've heard were that there were no katas originally.
Oh, it says.
Yeah, it was purely self-defense. When you started, were all the katas that you taught us, were all those part of it?
Yeah.
They were? Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, when Capella says that would have been, you know, probably in the 60s. And then, you know, because you see them doing kata in those old videos from the 70s, in the tournament videos. So I mean, you can see this a little bit in the katas that we know. This is mainly theoretical on my part, but I think there's some evidence of that. I think what Durant probably did is he was just interested in fighting and self-defense. And so he was just doing techniques, right? Just really like you do in judo. Like there's a judo kata, but the judo kata that I've trained with, they only remember it because they had to do it for their black belt, and they don't practice it anymore. They just do the techniques. They just do the throws, right? So I think Durant was from that kind of school of thinking. But then at some point he recognized the value of kata. And I think what he did is he started by saying, okay, well, let's do the Shotokan forms, like the Heian forms, and let's make a Goshin Jutsu version of them. So that's why we still have like Heian Shodan, Heian Yodan floating around, right? This Goshin Jutsu version. And a lot of the styles did that, right? You have an Isshin-Ryu version of Heian, you know, the Heian katas and so on and so forth. But then I think at some point he recognized that he said, well, let's create our own styles, kata for our own style. And you can see kind of like in the system, like, so you have like, you know, Hajimete, Futatsume, Mitsume, Yotsume. So at first he probably had a plan to say, well, I'm just going to name them first kata, second kata, third kata, fourth kata, right? And he could have just continued, right? And then think about something like Bando no Undo and Murasaki Bando. Murasaki is really Murasaki Bando no Undo. So then he was naming them after colors, right? So now you have, the first kata for the first belt, and then you have like the purple belt kata, right? And so you could see kind of the evolution of his thinking of how to do this, and then suddenly there are these just names, right? Like, I'm just going to name this kata this thing. I don't know how many were developed by other people too. Like Jim Fife was a big kata person, and so I don't know if he developed some of those forms himself. I used to have this Niton Bo kata that was just handwritten notes from Grandmaster Durant that Matt Durant gave me, and over the years, just these notes disappear, and so he had these kata, like he'd write them out, so.
Now, training in other styles, they spend a big amount of time, like exploring the bunkai of kata and stuff. And in Goshin Jutsu, I haven't seen that a ton, right? It's like, here's the form, here's how you do the form. And I've found that I've done that. Like, as I've learned more about sort of those concepts that you were talking about and stuff, I really delved into the kata and started to think about, what are we actually doing here? Do you think at the core principles of Goshin Jutsu that the kata are really like a fundamental building block? Or do you think it's more the self-defense still?
Well, this might sound like this will be kind of blasphemy for a lot of karate people. I don't care that much about kata bunkai. I care in the sense of, punch is a punch, a block is a block.
Mm-hmm.
This mimics a throw or something like this. I care on that level, right? I don't care for, like, a lot of people, and don't take this as something like, people shouldn't do it. This is just my personal, thinking on it. I don't care about trying to figure out fancy applications of moves. I've seen people do things with the, movements in Ichino Heibi, especially the series where you do the spear and thrust, and they'll do like wrist locks and, they'll do all sorts of interesting things. I think it's interesting, but that's it. So I would say it's both, in the sense that what really matters about those kata are, how do you move your hips? How do you control your center of balance? How do you move across the floor in a fluid, efficient manner? How do you generate power and techniques? How do you use kind of the speed, the rhythm? So I care much more about those things than the applications. And I think one of the reasons I feel that way is because it's fine to say this is an application, but it's always different than the actual application, right? It's always different when you put a human body in there. Right. So I do say it's both. Like, if I were to reinvent a style, I would still have kata. I think kata is important. Just like I would if I'm boxing, I shadow box, right? And I have combinations that I use, and and there are things that I do in shadow boxing that I don't actually do when I hit. Like in shadow boxing, I'll throw a hook like this, but in actuality, I always throw the hook like this when I hit back. I don't think it's disrupted anything. But yeah, I would always have kata, but I think the techniques are probably even more, as far as actually learning how to do things, it's the techniques. And of course, then it connects in the sense of, well, if I'm going to practice my hook kick, how am I going to practice my hook kick? Like, I am thinking about, how do I do it in the air? How do I do it when I hit a target? How do I do it on a partner? It is a piece of a kata if I wanted to create a kata. And of course, then the kata have limits, because we can't do every technique in a kata.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so that's a kind of like, I think they're both important. Uh, I wouldn't get rid of kata, but I wouldn't go back to the old school days of only doing kata. I think it's wise that we do kumite, and it's wise that we do techniques outside of kata applications.
Well, I think the self-defense waza that we do in Goshin Jutsu is sort of like in Aikido or Jiu-Jitsu, where you're using partner practice and you're feeling it and you're doing it. And we spent so much time doing that. And I think even doing just that part translates into the kata, even if it's not exactly a bunkai or whatever. It's still there.
Yes, yeah.
And I think it accelerates really the learning part of it, of everything you're doing over those styles that do just focus on 100 punches in the beginning of classes and then 45 minutes of kata practice, you know.
And there's a perfection of movement that is, you have to do by yourself, right? Because once you do put the partner in there, that affects how you do the movement. And so they do go hand in hand. So I don't mean to devalue kata, but because I don't feel that way. But yeah, I think all those modes of practice are necessary. And one of the reasons that I stuck with Mr. Capella is because if you take a video of Mr. Capella doing kumite and then you erase the person he's doing kumite with, you would think he was doing a kata. You know? I mean, pay attention to his stance work and how he moves his body and everything else. They're not distinguished. I was just watching this Japanese YouTube guy, a young guy, but you know, he's a valuable series because obviously, you know, we got plenty of poor Japanese in Goshin Jutsu. So I was kind of just looking at the different things like that. But he was demonstrating kata and and talking about applications. But then he has a video of him doing kumite, and what's the kind of kumite he's doing? He's doing this kind of style that it's kind of the side stance kind of bouncing thing, and then
Yep.
And that looks nothing like a kata, and it looks nothing like a self-defense technique. And so you do start to ask yourself, right? Like, well, what is the connection between kumite and kata and self-defense techniques? Why should it be so vastly different? And I know why. I mean, there's some competition elements that make it, in competition, you win by offense, not by defense. And so I mean, there's some real reasons why. It's not a full critique of him, but I do appreciate that Capella does things. His body movements are always the same. And so I appreciate that. And as far as kumite and sparring and differentiating, maybe you're sparring for competition and the sparring that you do in the dojo. I've been in the dojo with Capella a lot of times where he's running a kumite session, and some things he won't even acknowledge that it was a point. And why? Because you weren't in a right position or solid enough. Like, sure, the person's hand brushed by your nose, but you couldn't have had any real impact, so he doesn't bother with it. Yeah. But yeah, if I were to start all over again, I would say, yeah, you got to do kata. I think Bruce Lee made a mistake, when he tried to say, not to do kata. But what he was probably recognizing was the problem of limiting your techniques, or something like this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's value in variety just to keep it interesting as well. Like, I enjoy doing kata. It's like a almost meditative experience when I'm doing it by myself and just going through the movements, and it feels good. But I also enjoy throwing people around. It's fun, exciting. So trying to convey that those are the same moves to students. Sometimes they don't always see that connection, but I think I agree. It's valuable to have all of those different things.
Yeah. Don't give up your kata yet.
I've invested a pretty substantial amount of time learning and doing kata, so yeah, I'm not.
Well, of course,
I'm committed.
of course,
committed.
Bruce Lee was already trained in kata when he gave them up. You
Yeah.
know, so he already had the benefits of them. Yeah.
Mike, do you have any more, or do you want to do it?
List right now, I think we hit just about everything.
Always other things, right? When I
And
told
it's
my,
not like. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, when I tell my students is like, you know, sometimes it's like, well, the class session is over, so we're stopping, but the conversation always continues because
Yeah.
there's always more to talk about. We're just stopping this session.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
So we'll do a quick outro. Thank you so much for your time. Really, truly appreciate it. Always enjoy our conversations whenever they happen. So hopefully they happen more frequently. We haven't talked much lately. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this, guys. Like I said, I you know, I have my own little anxieties about social media, so I don't mind someone else doing something on social media, and then I don't have to monitor it. I don't have to deal with any comments or doesn't have to take up any headspace. But martial arts is still my favorite subject, and I don't know where I would be in life if I hadn't started doing martial arts. It was the first thing that gave me any sense of self-esteem, and so it's very special to me. And it's nice when you can teach and for how long or how short the students are there to see that maybe you gave them something else that they can take with them and help them in their lives in whatever way. You know, Master Royce is the one who told me this years ago, and it's still important today. Is just that, you know, the martial arts is a supplement to your life. It isn't your life. I mean, but you know, for me, I would just say, yeah, it's a supplement that I try to take regularly. You know, it is that important. You know, it's a vitamin that's necessary, and if it suddenly went away, I think I would diminish as a person.